morning at NTV.
None of us here is a historian, but we are all students of history. And history is not just the path that is left by the past. Presidential legacies do not materialize, sometimes not even in our lifetime. These will have to be counterbalanced, they will have to be foregrounded and validated by history. So Uhuru's legacy right now will just be, what the press coverage has been and what we remember in recent times. But how this plays in the larger context, in the greater trajectory in which the country is going, will be evident many years later. I'll give you a very good example. President Moi's legacy on education. That's what created us sitting here, the free primary education, the expansion of high school, the expansion of universities. That created a very, very strong middle class, a very, very strong educated cadre.
It's now 7:45 a.m. It's morning at NTV, Tuesday's edition. It was a Tuesday. Kenya went to elections on the 9th of August. It's a Tuesday, 13th September 2022, and they're waiting for the ceremony of the swearing in of the 5th president as the Republic of Kenya. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga, your host for the Kickstarter conversation this morning. Now, Kenya's Treasury provided 200 million Kenyan shillings, which is about 7 billion Ugandan shillings, for today's swearing-in ceremony of President-elect Wiliam Ruto after the Supreme Court upheld his election victory. In its pre-election economic update, the Treasury says the allocation of the 200 million Kenyan shillings under the Executive Office of the President is provided for in the National Treasury for assumption of office activities. How should East Africa as a region be excited for Ruto's service as President of Kenya? Subsequently, Uganda paid $65 million in the first installment of the $325 million it was ordered to pay to the neighbors Democratic Republic of Congo as compensation for losses caused by wars in the 1990s when Ugandan troops occupied Congolese territory. This is 1 in 5 installment plans for payment, and Somalia, on the other hand, they are at the verge of joining the East African bloc. We want to digest the East African region integration issues, and in studio we do have Fred Mukasa Mbidde, who is the Member of Parliament for EALA. Good morning to you.
Morning, my dear.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And
I am
we
extremely
hope that
grateful.
We get to see an impact on the East African region with what's happening right now.
Yes, properly, we will.
Okay, all right. Next to him, I'm joined by Joseph Ochieno, who's a political analyst. Good morning to you, Joseph.
It's a pleasure to be here, all of you.
Okay, and Sarah Bireete, who has been very observant of the Kenyan elections, from the 9th into the whole court issues, and here they are, swearing in day. What does this mean to you, Sarah? Good morning.
Well, I first of all want to congratulate the people of Kenya on this milestone. Kasarani was full by 5 a.m. Many citizens want to witness history, want to witness the peaceful handover of power, and that is, I think, the 4th time Kenya is experiencing peaceful handover of power, because the first time from Mzee Jomo Kenyatta to Moi, Mzee Jomo died in office. But from then on, there has been peaceful handover of power, so we celebrate with them. We, on the Ugandan side, it's a reflective moment, because right from independence, we've never seen peaceful handover of power in this country. Every president goes running, and the people who chase him, because we've not also had a lady, so it's okay to refer to the men. And the people who chase the running president are always with guns, sometimes the ragtag clothes, taking power. So, and I think it's a bit, to see that we are going to celebrate 60 years in a few weeks, 60 years of independence, and for 6 decades. Nobody has got it right in Uganda. It's really embarrassing, and I think we should continue to challenge ourselves as citizens as to why we cannot have a normal nation like the other countries, including the neighborhood. But on the East African perspective, we are glad Kenya is still the current chair of EAC. So as Uhuru hands over power to Ruto, he's also handing over the chairmanship of the East African community. And Uhuru, in his last days, held a summit to work on solving the conflict in DRC, and just over the weekend, there was official assignment and on the deployment process. So we hope that that continues on track, and maybe just to underscore the principles of multilateral relations that should govern East African community as well are the principles of inclusion, consultation, and solidarity, and we hope that Ruto will continue and even perfect what Kenya has been offering in the leadership to the East African community.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Joseph, we have seen Kenya change power. Fifth president that is being sworn in today, and this has all been to the fact that over the different election periods, they've had the opportunity to improve their transparency, to be more engaged electively, and to ensure that they have a better picture of democracy being displayed, not just for themselves as Kenya, but as Kenya to the rest of the world. And so let's talk about that in reference to this peaceful transitions and how they've aided what we see as Kenya today, a very powerful nation within the East African region.
Yeah, indeed. It's by far the most powerful nation. Of course, Congo can talk power now in terms of the resource capacity. But really, that is by and large neither here nor there. Kenya is the economic powerhouse of East Africa. Structurally, it is. And amazingly, it's emerging as the, if you like, the political lead in terms of the democratic processes. Unfortunately, actually, the fact that this election was again challenged in the Supreme Court, and some of the issues that emerged, of course I'm flanked by my lawyer colleagues who possibly think and look at it critically deeper, and Sarah was, we were just having a chat before coming to the studios. She was a privileged observer there, so she would have seen quite a few things, but looking from a distance, there are quite clearly sufficient concerns to me to think back and say that perhaps as Africa, even Kenya, the lead nation for us, still has major lessons to learn. But Kenya actually starts from a relatively weak position of weakness. I was a young student in the 80s when Kenya was a monolithic one-party state. And there was only one voice of opposition. I keep repeating that, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And I remember as looking at some of the headlines in Kenya where you could not criticize Moi. But at the time, that was in the 80s, Uganda had just had a multi-party elections, and it was second year into our second democracy of UPC, and I argued deliberately that while that election was contested here in Uganda, it was never challenged in court. So all this remains speculations in Uganda, to the extent that I even want to correct Sarah. But for the purposes of not of making political point, but actually structurally a point of looking forward as lessons to learn as East Africans, that 1980 general elections, UPC won it. 1980 general elections, UPC won it convincingly. 1980 general elections, although it was contested by our friends DP and Mr. Museveni, they never subjected it to, if you like, the constitutional process. So if perhaps they went to court, maybe, just maybe, it would be somewhere, number one. Number two, actually, Milton Obote going to State House in Entebbe was not necessarily that he was chasing anybody. The military commission handed over power. But at the same time, it turns out that actually, apparently, Godfrey Benaiza, who had been overthrown by the military commission, was actually under house arrest in State House. And nobody understand it. They danced overnight as Benaiza left. I am saying that, saying that even here in Uganda, it's actually possible for us to look back, look at ourselves today, look at the hard lessons in Kenya, as Sarah says, and review and say that if even the Kenya of the 80s could go through these changes, not perfect, what about us? But quick point, considering that actually the guys who challenged the 1980 general elections in Uganda militarily are the guys who came into power banned political parties for 20 years in Uganda. We went through the processes legally to challenge them in court. You know, we won the rights to multipartyism in 2004. And from 2005, they very quickly come and change the constitution. And here we are really back into a one-party state, and a one-party state in which constitution amendments have been made, critical about term limits, critical about age limits. But for the term limits in particular, if term limits had been honored, it's very likely that we would also have seen transitions in Uganda, even if it is from the same political organization.
Likely,
yes.
Indeed.
So from that point of view, lessons to learn, and maybe it is still a possibility for this country that while Mr. Ruto comes in, and while we have a conversation about the new East Africa, perhaps there will be a good opportunity soon when leaders of the East African community begin to talk about convergence criteria in terms of what is acceptable in terms of political framework, institutional framework, including a democracy, and perhaps expediting the judicial process, for which for us we can begin to have maybe a superior judicial process where if the Supreme Court of Kenya has issues and is contested, the Supreme Court of Uganda has issues contested. For me, as Ochieno of UPC, perhaps I say I'll be willing to relinquish to a much more superior authority, meaning the East African Supreme Court of some sort, that may actually become an arbiter. That is important because the more we do that through constitutional and legal processes, the less likely we're going to go militaristic in a manner in which we have to go and pay back things in Congo.
We do have Honorable Mbidde here. For the East African region, this also represents a change, as we do have change in the chairperson of the East African Legislative Assembly. You get to have change, not just in, you know, a leader, but also change in the mindsets, because you've been having a different mindseted leader. Now you are getting another different mindseted leader who has other plans completely for the East African bloc. In your capacity, what does this peaceful transition then mean for the growth of the region?
Yes, you know, East Africa is a very interesting region. There was a time I made my comments when people from Kenya and Tanzania were actually taking pride that they have had a lot of leadership changes, and clearly that meant that they were democratic in nature. I said, okay, let us look at this scenario properly. In the East African region, at that time, because I made my analysis in 2013, and Kenya is just now taking leave of the same. During that period of time, I analyzed. I said, in East Africa, by the way, if you have the same leader leading a country for over 20 years, there must be questions in terms of the propriety of the factors and combinations that lead to that leadership. But if you have the same political party also leading a country for over 20 years, there must be very serious intrinsic questions again, also to be posed. And that now encompasses Tanzania also. Now, if you have the same families leading a country for over 20 years, there must also be critical questions. And I am telling you that Kenya is now getting off the hook, because I posed those questions, and I think now dynasties are dying away. We are beginning to have a few people also mushrooming and beginning to lead. Now, we are faced, and my brother also mentioned it, we are faced with a kind of a pendulum movement in history. All these East African countries have had not the same but similar historical backgrounds. You could say we were fed on the same umbilical cord of conviction that leaders don't want to go anywhere. So I can tell you that, for example, after independence, DP took some bit of leadership, which was a test. Then UPC took. I do not know what happens, but you can see that, because you see, after independence, there was a period that we lawyers call the period of constitutional autochthony, where people were now allowed to begin enacting their own constitutions. I can tell you that it is a pendulum movement in history. Why? Because the democratic leadership that took over from the kings, they took over from those that did not believe in term limits. They now established a semblance of democracy. But at the same time, when they were given powers to enact constitutions and run processes, they established almost the kind of leadership akin to the one that was removed when they were forming Uganda. So we are dealing with a very serious problem in East Africa.
Okay.
And that is something that we need.
All right, so a constitution has appeared in your deliberations, in Joseph's deliberations, it has appeared in Sarah's deliberations. So I guess it all comes down to the constitution. When we look at the constitutions of the superpower, which Kenya we're referring to as an economic power here in the East African region, we get to see that one of the reasons it has aided to be that is because of the constitution. When we get to look at countries like our own Uganda, one of the reasons as to why we seem to be stuck in the same cycle 35 years and ongoing is again because of the constitution. So superpowers versus the powers of the constitution. What should be the actual remedy for us to actually become a superpower, another superpower in the East African region? There are G7s, the 8s. Surely it cannot be one superpower. It's got to be a block of superpowers. And I believe that we can, as East Africa, be a block of superpowers. But it all comes down to the powers within the constitution. Tanzania, as we speak, their president is under a hot seat because she has had the consideration of revisiting their constitution, which means that it will cause changes that may not be appealing to certain people, to parties, and to the whole aim of democracy that is, you know, fast forward for an economy and also the region for that matter. So I'll start with you, Sarah. Superpowers versus the powers of the constitution.
Well, I think in modern history, you cannot run a country without a constitution. Even Britain, which is a constitutional monarch, has constitutional arrangements and a transition, smooth transition of power has happened. I think it's only the coronation ceremony that is pending. But Prince Charles has taken over as a head of state, and the country is in one piece. If you look at, they even had the London Bridge plan in the event that the Queen passes.
Do we need the template here?
But in the unlikely event that we have a national monarchy with a parliamentary system.
Continue, Sarah.
No, away from that. The spirit of a nation is rooted in the Constitution. And the Constitution on its own, without constitutionalism, cannot be effective to deliver the wishes of the people as envisaged at the promulgation stage. Kenya has had 3 constitutions. The 1963 Constitution, 1969 Constitution, which had the major amendment in 1975, and the 2010 Constitution, which has not been amended. I want to emphasize
that's important,
that.
Yes.
The 2010 Constitution was negotiated over 20 years, and it has not been amended. And that's why Kenya is making progress.
And it's 12 years now.
Yes,
untouched.
It's making progress. So when you look at our Constitution, on the other hand, the framers of the 1995 Constitution had big dreams for this country. And if you read the preamble, especially paragraph 3, a national and permanent constitution. Permanent in a way that you don't casually amend a constitution. Also, best practices of constitutionalism demand that you do not amend untested provisions. First, test a provision, find where it has a lacuna, and then cure that lacuna. That's what the legal amendments are supposed to be about. But in our constitution, Ugandans have been, in our situation, Ugandans have been taken for a big ride. All untested provisions that were supposed to check democracy, enforce peaceful transition of power, and prosperity of the nation have all been removed. You can as well call it deleted through the tyrant of numbers, without even the consensus of the people. And that's how we have ended up with a permanent presidency.
The argument will be that the representation in parliament is the census of the people.
That's neither here nor there when it comes to the constitution, the grand norm of a country. If you look at, for example, Kenya, 20 years of negotiating a constitution, with civil society, with political parties, with citizens, with a referendum. That process cannot be usurped by an MP because you got a majority vote at a polling station. Of course, there are challenges of delegated power and process through which a constitution should be amended. But good practice demands that you test the constitution and then amend where the provisions are problematic. So where did we find problems with term limits? Where did we find problems with age limit? And for what purpose were they enacted? And if you look at where we are, 40 years with one-man rule, the challenges in the nation are all out for us to see. There is already conflict, tensions, the populations, because as an individual, the purpose of term limits is to make sure that no single group of citizens have monopoly over institutions of power. But now you have people who seem like a royal tribe, who seem like a royal family, a royal tribe in Uganda. So are we a monarch? Are we a republican? Do we need to go into that debate?
And I'll turn that to Joseph.
Yeah.
Are we a monarchy? Are we a republic?
I don't know. As a Republican, I reject any sense of possibility of a national monarchy in this country. And that is official. That's from Uganda People's Congress. But if there are monarchies within communities and identities in Uganda, I respect them and I will continue respecting them. And there is a guarantee for them in the future UPC government. But look, it's very sad because the Britain that Sarah was hinting at is a constitutional monarchy. But in the British constitutional monarchism, Parliament is supreme.
Yeah.
You know, it's a parliamentary system.
The monarchy reigns.
The monarchy reigns informally.
At the
ceremonial level, like we had Sir Edward at the time granted as the ceremonial president and as the prime minister, who's an executive head of government, and it works to the extent that one of the things that would happen is that. Citizens do have these checks and balances. The longest in recent history for a continuous political party to be in power was the Conservatives with 11 years with Margaret Thatcher, and then Blair followed with just under another 11 years, and the Conservatives are competing about it at the moment. Elections, they only changed to a 5-year term. Parliament could dissolve at any particular time. So basically, it was just an unwritten system that you'll go through the process, but partly because the opposition is open and the political parties were free. And just like in Kenya, where it's very interesting today with that, 50-50 terms of balance of primary opposition versus the other. These checks and balances exist. But because the institutional systems are in place, the police is not questionable. I was lucky that I voted several times in Britain. And at no single time do you go to a polling station and you see police officers. At no except sign of polling station, you do not see anything. Kenyans try to do a bit of this, and notwithstanding the challenges that I've written, there are no major incidents up to and including when the big challenges were taking place in between the Constitutional Court. It is, as I said, business as usual. Do Ugandans, ordinary citizens in Uganda, watch and see that? Do guys in power in this country watch and see that? Do guys in the military in this country watch and see that? Do guys in the police, our sons and daughters, our boys and girls, people whom we pay, do they see that when people go ahead and get whipped at a mere by-election for a parliamentary seat? Moreover, you have a parliament in which you've got a consolidation of nearly 2/3 majority in parliament. What is it? No, I think the country under major test in this region is Uganda. Tanzania has its own system, and actually my brother raises an important question about the continuation of a one-party, meaning CCM, in power. They change system. They change regularly, and in CCM, if Madam President wants to be able to change the constitution, it's very unlikely she's going to be able to do so. Maybe those are lessons for us to do. In fact, had it been the case that in NRA after 1987, there was a change, maybe even Q positions for Besigye, whoever, maybe actually would not be thinking the way we are. Maybe the country would be possibly different. But the fact actually that it's one man, a continuation of the same system, and to the extent that you want to buy, and in fact sometimes almost kiss the opposition by force because you want to control. What's the difference with China? And China is in the context of a one-party monolithic state. Even in China now, they change leaders regularly for the Communist Party. And good enough with China, not only do they change leaders, now it appears that as a result of that stability in China, China's state businesses are now becoming national monopolies in Uganda.
Good.
Let's think
so
about it.
There's evidence of change of power bringing about not just evolution in the people, but also democracy, and just giving the country more opportunity to become better and better at every given opportune time. Which then I beg Honorable Mbidde, in this regard, regarding the London Bridge plan that you have talked about, do we know of any such plans in a country like Uganda? Even if it's just for peaceful transition of power. And then also the fact that there's a lot of influence in the governing arms, which is the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. You can't do this to another. It's only one person who can do this to another, do that to the other. There's no independence of these different arms to actually operate to the full capacity for which they were originally organized by, of course, those that we inherited such things from.
They are not actually arms. They are tools. It is not true that we have got arms of governance in Uganda, or that we have got, for example, substantive structures that one can talk of. The question is, who controls the political switch? Who does?
One man.
So once you have got an answer to that question, then you know that all he is establishing is a task force for continued rule. And that task force can be given all sorts of nomenclature. You can call it a court, you can call it an electoral commission, you can call it police, you can call it the army, you can even call it an election. But it is just that one person. And for me, I think there must be a strategic shift. That is why for us in DP, we are making contributions that will either be regarded or disregarded. Mutatis mutandis, and we shall act accordingly. Why am I saying so? You have posed the questions on constitutions. The Constitution of Kenya establishes independence of organs and institutions. The president cannot claim to have appointed any of those participants and actors. They have been advertised, people have qualified for jobs, others have even been disqualified, and clearly all the results can show. When you go to Burundi, because each step in a country's political development is a result of definite experiences. When you look at what Burundi went through because of the dichotomy between tribes, Tutsi, Hutu, the constitution provides for a clear division in terms of 60-40. For all intents and purposes, all institutions and organs, the share holding in terms of politics is 60-50. Well, when you get to Rwanda, and I have occasionally said it, Article 10 and 62, the constitution is very clear. A party that wins the presidency does not produce a speaker for the House of Representatives. That is number one. So even a loser knows he has won by losing. Now, a party that gets over 50, gets majority in parliament, does not get over 50% in cabinet. And you can imagine. So clearly an election in Rwanda is a trigger for a lot of changes. In Kenya, for example, power has been devolved. It does not even matter who leads the country. I can tell you, that's why they cannot fight. After the enactment of the 2010 constitution, you will not find people wielding pangas. Even when it is clear that the current leader now, who is going to lead by only by 50% of the support of the people. The plus 1% is merely 200,000 votes, which in any case, anyway, we are contested. So I can tell you, but no problem is going to happen. Why? Because power has been developed. Here in Uganda, even when we attempted decentralization, instead we did the deconcentration. You see, decentralization is where you would put powers now to the districts for purposes of governance. But instead, what government did was to begin governing those districts, but from the districts. But when it is the one governing, introducing and establishing cows and what, so that the political leaders are merely by They are ceremonial in nature. They promise construction of toilets, government decides on roads, and that's what happens. So in Uganda, we don't have a constitution that obtains what we call the grand norm as a test. Now, the grand norm is the presupposition at the subconscious level of every human being's brain that that constitution should be followed. What is there for the people in this current constitution? It is not there. It is just a set of rules, an architectural plan for continued leadership by the same government. So, for me, I think we need now to completely overhaul this thing, establish a new constitution. So we are back to 1995, where now framers sat down and started thinking that what are the solutions for the questions that we are posed historically. That is where we are going.
Okay.
Maybe just add one thing. You know, a constitution, if it gets in the way of anybody, that person should pave way for the constitution to prevail. But in our situation, when the constitution gets in the way of the president, the constitution must pave way.
It must take cover.
And the president must prevail.
Okay.
I think that describes our constitutionalism.
All right. Joseph, in regards to Kenya, it's on the spotlight right now. In Kasarani, you're seeing so many preparations, Thika Road, State House, and VIP entrances. You're seeing the army also preparing for the D-Day that is today, transition of peaceful power. So even though Kenya is being perceived as peaceful right now, there's transparency and democracy that has been duly exercised thanks to the constitution aiding. I know that there are still some challenges in there, challenges like the handshake that was in the outgoing administration, challenges like corruption that's still rampant in Kenya. Are such problems in the DNA of Kenya and also the region, or is it just the era that it was for Kenya?
I think
and that we should expect a different
it would be unfair
era.
to localize it to Kenya, as we're saying. Perhaps actually Kenya is the least affected in many of these issues, in many of these cases, except that considering how far they seem to have been moving, we would expect less of them. But Kenya, interestingly, just to an extent like Rwanda, amidst all these other challenges, the general relative infrastructure development, there are generally systems that work to the extent that actually leading to the elections, there was generally a lot of expectations and hope from most of us observing from outside Kenya. One thing obviously that clearly happened, it would appear, that arguments about state capture between the big powers, where there's one side from Uhuru and the other from Ruto, people have actually argued that election that took place was really a contest between the two, less about Raila, hence the question of the handshake, that actually part of the handshake thing possibly sank Raila. But quite clearly, like it has been suggested, it's really also true that the huge anomalies that took place in this electoral processes, and that's one of the reasons why the results by and large are contested. But of course, observers, including Sarah, would suggest, and some of us would perhaps agree to an extent, that yes, there may have been an element of laxity on one side, but generally systems that have been set are there, except that there are power games at play. But if to come back to some of the things that are actually happening there, I think Kenyans generally are much more of a determined population relative to, perhaps you could argue, Uganda and Tanzania. And I keep on confining myself to the three traditional East African countries because there's, from a historical perspective, to if you level it up in terms of infrastructure and commonality, they're really the ones who should actually be playing the lead roles, particularly in the democratic process. But then finally, if I want to say something very quickly about the constitutionalism of Uganda, I have an interest. 1995 constitution had a problem. 1995 constitution, the framers of the constitution were gathered at a time when political parties were banned. So UPC did not make a direct formal contribution to that, nor did DP, except members and individuals. And lest it's forgotten, Mr. Museveni normally talks about this thing. I think I should bring it here, because it's a psychological thing that my brother Mbidde talked about, that this is my constitution. At the time, parties were banned. So 2 slots were given for political parties and 10 slots for soldiers, for the army. Now, number two. Number three, very significantly, one of the biggest flaws of that constitution was to actually go ahead and entrench the banning of political parties. That took a legal lead by UPC and later joined by DP to actually lift the ban on political parties and others multi-partism. Constitutionalism is a political thing. The changes that we require in this region and in this country will have to be political. Political leaders will have to provide for that. Politicians, meaning not people in politics and using politics, politicians will have to be able to lead on that. And the majority of the citizenry will have to be politically mobilized and organized, you know, including and using vehicles like the civil society organizations to be able to cause these changes. Those are the voices of the people that will be able to make it possible for changes in this country, make it possible and better for the changes in Kenya, and make it possible and better for changes in the new emerging countries, including South Sudan and Congo DR, and of course, as it has been suggested, possibly Somalia.
Okay, all right. Let's look at the Ruto era that begins today. In his first 100 days, he's intending to reduce the price of unga to 90 shillings from 230 Kenyan shillings. He's intending to do some tax reductions. He also has intentions of focusing on agriculture by reducing on the costs that are coming around, things like fertilizers. He's focusing on small, medium enterprises as well as the agricultural sector to give them a financial boost. But then again, he's also inheriting a devastating economy as we speak right now. So with those 100 years and those promises to be fulfilled within the 100 days, you get to look at a lot of pressure for the incoming party.
Well, Ruto has promised a hustler nation for Kenya. He campaigned on the promise of a hustler nation that really excited people, including especially young people. Kenya has, like any other country, is facing the high cost of living. Although they have tried to mitigate it through keeping a stable cost of fuel, there's a difference of between 1,000 to 1,500 shillings on Kenyan fuel than Uganda, at least at the time of elections when we were there, and yet the prices had gone up, meaning that maybe ordinarily there's a difference of about 2,000 Kenyan shillings with our cost of fuel. But Uhuru's big promise is to bring down the cost of living and try to mitigate the unemployment, because out of the increasing cost of living, there's a 5% population that have lost jobs throughout the COVID period, coupled with the effects of Ukraine war. 5% of the formerly unemployed people have lost jobs in Kenya. But it's also important to underscore that 44.8% of Kenyans are in middle income class, whereas in Uganda it's 18.7%, and the average middle income population in the all East African countries is 22.4%, according to the African Development Bank latest data. So you have a strong economy that is able to observe to some extent the economic shocks coming out of external factors that a country cannot control in its own. But Kenya is also struggling with a high public debt. Borrowing from President Biden's court when it was brought to the attention of the senators, the U.S. debt had gone above 100%. He said there is no problem with the country borrowing so long as they have capacity to pay. So if you look at stronger economies like the US, where the public debt is above 100%, Kenya is about 70%. Do they have capacity to pay back? Yes, they have a stronger economy compared to Uganda. But they are also facing the economic shocks with a high cost of living, cost of unga, cost of rising unemployment levels, cost of fuel that affects every other cost of living. Will Ruto manage in 100 days? I think he will, using monetary policies. I know our country on several occasions have said they cannot intervene in the cost of living, But Tanzania has been intervening in the cost of living, and President Samia Suluhu has promised that as long as it takes, she's going to mitigate fuel pump prices by injecting money in the petroleum sector. So he can intervene, and there are several monetary tools that he can use to bring down further the cost of living in Kenya. And if he's determined to do it, he will. The only debate is to what extent.
To what extent?
Yes.
All right. Honorable Mbidde, in the East African region, you get to see a Ruto era beginning today. What is he inheriting in terms of the East African bloc?
Yes. First of all, he's going to enjoy economies of integration that are beginning to mushroom. Probably one warning that needs now to be given to him, if indeed he wants to underscore and generally to put down prices of unga, as he said. There must be very serious procedures for standardization of the distributed cereals and products from the cereals, other than clinging on to the determination of aflatoxin levels and the kind of cataclysm they have been establishing against the trade between Uganda and Kenya. I think supply will determine availability of what they actually need. When you look at what he has inherited, for the last 10 years, the figures indicate that they have doubled the infrastructure development levels.
Yes.
Doubled even from the period commensurate, 1962 to 2013, they have doubled it. So he's generally taking over an economy that is at takeoff stage. I think he can be able to do wonders in case that is what he's heading for. So he will have fun. He's going to deal with an economy that is going to also benefit from, of course, the interoperability of the East African Community Monetary Union. If, for example, it is actualized by 2024, as we are working around the clock, establishing, of course, equalization grants at the level of the Exchequer Board of the Bank of East Africa and all that, I can tell you that, of course, Kenya will still continue to lead, to lead our economies in East Africa.
Okay.
What Madam Sarah has also raised is something very, very important. When you look at a population of over 50 million people, with a GDP per capita of close to 1,840, then you know it is just a question of redistribution. Yeah. Because you see, what it actually entails is redistribution. What East African states did not do well after COVID was what we would have called quantitative easing processes. How do you inject real cash and capital into the bags of small and medium enterprises?
And that is where we'll pick it up from when we return from this break shortly.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
Into the other half of 8 a.m. The conversations are still intriguing. We are focusing on Kenya because they've shown us the way, the truth, and the life. And now we want to see how exactly we can pick some of these and have them become realities for a country like Uganda. But then again, it all comes down to the debate of the Constitution. And but now also in the East African region, there's so much pressure because while Kenya is fast moving forward, the question is, are the other members of the bloc also moving at the same pace, or are they following the same path? You do have DRC that has just joined the bloc most recently. Then you do have Somalia that is also trying to squeeze themselves into the bloc to belong. Perhaps they're seeing some positives, a question that I'm going to be deliberating about right now. Actually, let me turn to you, Joseph. In regards to the region, you do have DRC that has just joined, and we want to find out the value addition of that. But also in the same season, you do have Somalia that is on the verge of joining the very same bloc. And so why is this region attracting members?
I honestly don't know. I'm a Pan-Africanist to the extent that given an opportunity, I'd want to have an African influence that ranges all the way to Brazil, where we have the largest African population outside this continent, as Africa as a one nation. But that said, this East African integration thing, as it is with my brother here, I don't know, it concerns me. It concerns me because we're integrating at a pace and we're not addressing the underlying issues. So while I was saying that I hoped that we had this East African system that worked.
What do you consider the underlying issues?
Governance. We are discussing what's happening in Kenya. Whatever's happening in Kenya cannot be applied here. Economics. Whatever's happening in Kenya, you had the hint about the maize, ugali, cannot be, you know. Normally when nations integrate, and that's why I keep on talking about the original, traditional East African community nations, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. The expansion of the community needed one, most importantly, to be a subject of debate by national citizens of those countries. These are conversations that needed to be led by political parties in the respective countries, take them to the party members, take them to the grassroots citizens, have a conversation about what the issues are within those nation states. Maybe Ugandans give an opinion about what they don't like about Kenya. Maybe Kenyans give an opinion about what they don't like about Congo. You know, thrash it through an electoral process, take it through a referendum. Right now, I could argue that if it was not because the four of us are relatively privileged, you go back to my mini small town of Nagongera, I don't know how many people know that Somalia is also creeping in. I don't know how many people know that DR Congo is now a member of our community, especially if one of the headlines is that $65 million is to be paid.
It has been paid, actually. The first installment has been paid.
Indeed, as I'm telling them, to be paid to DR Congo as a debt over a war that we engaged in Congo, a war that was not approved or sanctioned by Parliament, a war that nobody has ever explained genuinely to the citizens of this country, a payment that up to today I have no understanding why we are paying. And then too, if it's about to plunder, who are these people who plundered, who sanctioned the plunder, and the payment for which I can ask myself that $65 million, even if that is all the money, that's a huge amount of money. We're talking about infrastructure here, where my Nagongera Toro Road is a slum, where my brother will tell you that traffic in Kampala is like what?
You know, the roads in Kampala are operating as a parking lot.
Parking lot. Yeah. There you go. You know, so $65 million would do us a lot to sort out the mess about parking lot here, and indeed the parking lots in Toronto. So, if we have this as Uganda, you know, we are paying Congo $65 million. You know, the roads to Nagongera is waiting. Parking lots exist in Kampala.
Please add that
and we are trying to entrench ourselves into
not shillings. Yes.
US dollars.
Okay. All right. So
what is it with Congo?
Joseph is a representation of criticism that has come by so many others. EALA members not helping in mitigating the economic constraints, parking lots, especially
let
in
me
the
begin
case of
by
Uganda.
By the Congo. By the way, there is a, if I was the president of Uganda, there are serious issues I would raise with this kind of payment that we are doing. The International Court of Justice, incidentally, the rules of procedure provide for, among others, that before trial commences of a matter, the parties must agree to the jurisdiction of that court. That is what it provides. What is the agreement about? You must first of all have agreed that all avenues, arbitral avenues have been exhausted to the extent that now you need a court trial. Now, we were joint offenders with the Republic of Rwanda. How come Rwanda won its case and we lost ours? Just one. Our own lawyers agreed. Our own lawyers agreed. They acceded to the jurisdiction of that court. We must investigate.
Wasn't it a deal then, perhaps?
Yes, it has to be investigated. What was the persuasion that our lawyers had to accede to the jurisdiction of a court, to try a matter that has not been arbitrated upon, to try a matter where the two countries have not held bilaterals, a matter where two countries, friendly countries by the way, were not given an opportunity to arbitrate their own matter. The others raised the jurisdiction matter and were off the hook. They are not paying a single coin. Our lawyers must explain. This is something that cannot be taken for granted. Number two, the East African community, clearly, when you want to assess it, giving its own four limbs, speculated limbs of integration that we shall follow, which ultimately end in the fourth limb of political integration. In my opinion, that is the limb where the population will be able to understand all and sundry. But now the first limb of, East Africa is one country for customs purposes. It is one country for market purposes. It is one country, about to be one country for monetary purposes. But if it is not rights-based, we will never have it.
Okay.
And
allow
that
me
is where
to
the problem
just
lies.
interrupt you right there. We do have an update that is coming through from Kenya, NTV Kenya.
I told you this morning, this is a great day for the democracy of this country and for freedom. We have come from a 5-year period of police state, intimidation, harassment, and lack of freedom. And today, I'm told Kasarani is already full, and the air around the stadium is nothing but freedom. Kenyans are free. I, regarding Gachagua and my family, are feeling free. We have lived here for the last 5 years. It's been hell with the state surveillance, with intimidation by police officers, Friday arrest, closure of accounts, being followed everywhere, listening to my telephone conversations. And I want to say that I'm very happy for the last 5 days. We have slept well. We feel good that once again the people of Kenya are free to associate with whoever they want politically, to make a choice over their friends. And mostly what I'm happy about is that this country has been given to a great man, a great leader, a committed man, a hard worker, a man with a passion and a zeal to serve Dr. Wiliam Ruto. I'm so proud and privileged that I will be assisting him in the management of the affairs of this country. I couldn't have a great honor, and I'm sure I have no doubt that under the leadership of Dr. Wiliam Ruto, we will turn this country around and will make a difference in people's lives, will improve the quality of life, will make sure people have money in the pocket, will create a good environment for business, and will make sure that the people of Kenya, their dignity is restored by recreating wealth, by enabling them to pay bills, to put food on the table, to be able to take their children to school without too much trouble. And if we can do that, that will form our legacy, basically.
I do not want to be the person to slow you down today, but I understand that as you walk down here, you're heading to the Thanksgiving ceremony just behind your house. Maybe how important is prayers for you?
Well, what is happening today has nothing to do with me. We have seen the heart of God. The obstacles put on our path to leadership were insurmountable. No human being could have dealt with what was before us. The entire government machinery was weaponized against us. The DCI, the EACC, the KRI, the police, everybody, even you in the media were against us, both print and electronic. You are not nice to us. You had taken sides. You are doing fake opinion polls. You had very bad things to say about us. But God, in His mercy, has come through for us. It is for that reason that I have called for my family. And I want to tell the people of Kenya to take care of their families. Families are very important. When the state came heavily on me and brutalized me and persecuted me, all my friends ran away. All my business partners ran away. I was left with my wife and my 2 children and our close family members. Let every Kenyan take care of your family. Those are the most important people. If things get out of hand, those are the only people you can count on. All these other people will desert you in our hour of need. When you are down, they'll switch their phones on you. They'll even block you. They run away from you, and they are not available for you. But family is an important ingredient in somebody's life. My family is a wonderful family. They have stood with me in very difficult circumstances. Even when there was fear for my life, my family.
All right, that is Rigathi Gachagua, who's the deputy president-elect, also waiting to take on the instruments of power as a leader of Kenya. And he's spoken about family, but also he's spoken about the sound of freedom in Kenya right now. But also, back to Mbidde, you were talking about the possible sounds of freedom in the East African region.
Yes, I think we need to think of rights if we are to integrate properly. When you still have leaders that think rights are actually a reward. Yes, and that you must even thank them when they actually give you some bit of rights. Because there are people who are saying they should be thanked that people sleep. I have always told people that a man with all our capacity and endowment in terms of physical force can very easily commit the offense of rape. But if I traveled with a lady from here to Gulu in a bus, is it really prudent if I don't rape her to tell her to thank me for not raping her? Because ideally it is imprudent for anyone to commit that offense. Clearly, nobody should even thank you that you have not done it. Everything gets obliterated when rights are unavailable. There are people that had progressed. The Sadak court, for example, they had a court. It had progressed. It was trying even human rights causes. Here we don't have a regional court that tries human rights causes. We don't. The East African court doesn't. We have stretched Article 6D beyond capacity. It doesn't go there. Now, but just one case, Campbell versus Republic of Zimbabwe, where whites had, of course, land was taken away from them, and they had won a case of illegal takeovers. That court almost collapsed because Zimbabwe refused to clearly kowtow to the judgments of that court. So here, rights is a very key matter. When you have an election that concludes when every competitor is on bail, then you know it is very unlikely that clearly integration is going to be easier. However, the vision is the best. With the Congo, you know, we have got an outlet now. We have got almost now Congo, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania. We are linked to the seas at all corners, and the trade can be the best. We can now be, East Africa can be declared an El Dorado of some sort. But, as I told you, it is important that we respect rights, and we must move in tandem therewith if we are to get there safely.
All right, $325 million US, it's what's going to cost Ugandans.
Yes.
To pay back Congo for the 1990s war.
I need those lawyers.
Those are $1 million.
Yes. Let's talk about the impact of this debt to the country of Uganda right now, Sarah.
You know, the Uganda's, what was termed as invasion of Congo, and we considered, I think, at the international court level, I think we've considered at two levels. One was the Tsangani clashes, 1, 2, and 3, when our security chiefs went to Rwanda for mediation and considered that our troops were in the wrong. Many people disagreed at that level. And if you are not in an operation area, you only rely on issues you see in the public domain. But when DRC dragged Uganda to the International Court of Justice, by then we had, our bilateral relations were not so good because Uganda was then still backing Jean-Pierre Bemba, who also had an attempted coup on another territory, the Central African Republic. And our relations with the President Joseph Kabila then were not good because that was during his first term. We had a hostile relation. And when it came to the government's notice that we are being served, I think the people in charge by then took the matter casually. They thought they would get away with the allegations. They did not know that the DRC had UN video evidence of the crimes committed by our troops. So indeed, we lost out at mediation stages because of an arrogant approach to the matter. Later, when the court passed a judgment, then the government woke up, because there was an attempt at one time to attach our properties abroad by DRC in terms of enforcing the court decision, and by then it was $11 billion, because now it has come down heavily out of mediation efforts at appeal level. So when DRC said they would attach Uganda's properties abroad, that's when the country woke up and tried to talk to DRC at equal terms, other than underlooking the leadership in DRC. And the mediation at appeal level brought to the figure to nothing. But I share the views of Honorable Mukasa Mbidde that this is, Ugandans are paying for the careless adventure in DRC that had no approval, sovereign approval, the misconduct of UPDF, because we are also paying for allegations of rape, those are personal crimes. They should have nothing to do with it. A taxpayer paying for damages for raped women in DRC. When our troops were pulling out of DRC, then we saw a trail of women. I hope many Ugandans still remember those images. A trail of women that walked following men here. I don't know whether some were rape victims, whether some were victims of sexual assault, that now a taxpayer is paying for. It's very shameful.
All right, 32 years later, and Uganda gets to pay for the crimes that did happen. Were not sanctioned, neither approved. I will ask Joseph to give closing remarks on this conversation.
Extremely sad, and I think it's a shame for us as a country. But again, as Sarah says, these are things that we should not be paying for. Like I said earlier, I think if you consider the amount of money, it's a huge amount of money for a struggling nation and a struggling economy like us, and a nation where at the top there is a sense of arrogance, where people struggling with the cost of living cannot be supported in any way, including in basic elevation of fuel, and yet we're spending a lot of money like that on people who were commanded, or perhaps commanders, and perhaps instructed by a commander-in-chief to go on an adventure in Congo, for which Ugandans have never had a basic explanation. So I think it's that. But also on the other hand, while therefore we're looking at having a one and united East Africa, we must say that, well, you know, the scars and scatters that we've left in Congo. Maybe going forward, this may be an opportunity with seeing what is happening in Kenya, that we review our systems, we review our own sense of leadership, we review the systems within our own institutions. You saw the Kenyan incoming vice president talking politics, which is very interesting. While we were praising Kenya, he's talking about, you know, the excesses that took place in Kenya in the last 5 years, ironically, with a Kenyan vice president who's now his boss as president. So a bit of a conflict story there. But what is important about that is that that's the beauty of relative freedom and democracy, that you're able to agree to disagree, make your expressions, but within limit, and manner in which actually you know that the repercussions are you not fleeing the country or going into jail.
Okay, all right, thank you. So Joseph, thank you so much, Honorable Mbidde, and thank you so much, Sarah, for your submissions. They open a can of worms instead of closing some worms. Anyway, at the end of the day, the high costs of living on a national treasury that as of this morning we know is as empty as a corridor, and yet we do have such pressures coming on as a country. The question is, who is going to be paying this debt? And whose burden is it at the end of the day? Is it the leadership's burden, or is it your burden, my burden? That's a question I don't know who has the answer to. But within the East African region, there is been a roadmap to having peaceful transitions, and how that actually in turn brings about powers of economy, powers of legislation, and powers of democracy, not just for one country, but for all other countries that want to emulate the same direction that Kenya is doing. So, well, at the end of the day, so many changes are happening, right from colonial, where you do have the queen that lays rest right now. Now the East African region is also having changes. What about Uganda? I don't know. I leave that in your hands. Thank you so much for having been a part of Morning at NTV. We're going to be bringing you live pictures of the swearing-in ceremony of the 5th president of Kenya, and that is Wiliam Ruto. For now, have yourselves a good day.